right, here we have waves, voltage, amps. We have guitar, and we also have a whole suite for bass as well. So we've already heard the guitar a little bit. To give you just a little sample of the bass here. So we have two different bass amps here. Powerful, right? All right, we'll get back to that in just a minute. So overall, both of these are very easy to use and easy to figure out. We'll go over the controls here real quick. So both of these, both the guitar and the bass suites, are going to have mono to stereo, and then straight up stereo versions. Now you're probably going to be using the straight up mono to mono most of the time for both of these, especially if you're double tracking. But there may be times when you want to use like mono to stereo, and there may be times when you need the straight up stereo version, but you have your options right there, which is very important, especially for things like Pro Tools. Here in Studio One, we can easily switch from mono to stereo in just a click. A little bit different in some other DAWs. So over here on the voltage amps guitar, we have 5 different guitar amps. As you heard there at the beginning, very different. These aren't really modeled after any specific guitar amps. They're more of modeled over after like different flavors of guitar or different styles of guitar. So my favorite, of course, is the aggro, because it's pretty heavy metal. You can get some really great tones out of the aggro there. But let's go over the controls. Pretty simple stuff, folks. Here, click to select the amp that you want. Very simple. You have your input over here. So if you want to drive your input more or less, of course. Now there at the beginning, I did have wider on after the guitar amps, just for some stereo width, since I can't double track in real time. But we'll turn that off for the rest of the video. Whenever I'm just playing around with guitar, I always like something like wider, a stereo maker, just something that makes it from mono to stereo, just because it feels better when I'm just playing around. But we'll turn that off for the remainder of the video. All right. So again, your input level, pretty simple stuff. We know how this works. There's your overall output level right there. And as you can tell, each of these amps have the same exact control. So it makes it really easy. Once you understand one, you understand all of them. So we have clean, drive, and lead for each of our 5 different guitar amps. So of course, clean, kind of drive it. Obviously, what amp you choose will have an effect on how much drive there is. Then your lead channel, of course, the highest gain of all of them. Okay, pretty simple stuff to figure out if you've ever played with any guitar amp ever before in your entire life, right? You have your noise gate. We all know what that does. You set your threshold and the speed of that gate. Really good for, if you have noise or things like that. You can just use your threshold and your speed to dial that out. Works really well for metal, especially if you're doing a lot of palm muting. You're doing a lot of gent kind of stuff. Pull that threshold up, pull that speed up. You can just gent along, absolutely no problem. Sounds great. Then we have a focus, and the focus is basically constrains the frequencies of the dry guitar. So it's going to reduce some of that low end, make it a bit tighter overall, maybe reduce a bit of the top end, and just sort of focus that overall guitar sound. You can hear it very well right here. Right, it's really constraining the DI. This works very well if you have an extended range guitar and you want to cut out some of that really extreme low end of like your 8th string or a 9th string, where it's just so overpowering that you can't hear anything else. So that's what your focus will be used for. Of course, we know what the gain does. I mean, come on. You can get extremely saturated, especially with this aggro here. Then we have our standard EQ, bass, middle, and treble. I think we all understand what this does. You also have a lock here, so whenever you're switching between either like your modes, your amps, you can make sure that your EQ is gonna, stay the same. Okay, turn the lock off there. You have your volume. Again, we know what that does. Sometimes you may need to compensate. Obviously, whenever you're going between amps, between different modes, compensate with your overall volume. Then you have your depth and your presence. Of course, the depth is going to affect sort of the overall bottom end of the tone, and the presence is the overall, the overall top end. You can really hear that on, especially with this aggro, on some metal style tracks here. So I pull the depth all the way down. Even if I pull the focus all the way down. All right. So pull the low end, pull the bass in there. All right, we have some low end there, but we have the depth all the way down. If we pull this depth all the way up, now we have this extremely deep sound. All right, so use the depth in conjunction with your focus and your bass setting to get just the bottom sound, the low end sound that you want. Of course, same thing for your presence. Be very, very harsh. Way too much for me. All right, let's move on to the cabinet now. We can bypass the cabinet here if you want to use your own impulse responses, but there's some pretty good impulse responses in here already. So to select a cabinet, a matched pair of cabinets, of course, just choose between 1 through 6 here. And then you have your cab tone. And that's where you're sweeping through more of a dark tone or a darker cabinet to a brighter style cabinet there. All right, pretty simple to figure that out. Wide range of tones in your cabinet select. Then you have a room setting, which is really great on things like leads. Put that on maybe clean. So of course, dial in some of those early reflections from the room. Pull it up here. Right, it fills that out. All right, so that's all the settings here. Pretty simple to figure out there. Up here, you can change the size of the user interface. Check out the manual there if you want to. All right, size of the guitars. Now we'll come over here to the bass. More of a vintage feel here. Same stuff here with our cab, except instead of choosing a cab, we're just going between our dark and our bright cabinets, our matched pair of cabinets. That sounds pretty cool there. Got some of that room dialed in. But a cool thing on these bass amps, so we can control the direct input here as well, and also dial in our DI to play it along with our amp sound. It's a very standard thing to do, to blend in just the unaffected direct in bass with your amped sound. Makes it a bit more snappy overall. So we can do that over here. We can, of course, invert the phase of the direct right there, change the tone of the direct right here, if I can grab the knob, the level of that direct, and of course, sweep between the amp and just the DI there. So if we listen to just the amp, for example, so that's just the amp, and pull in the DI. Of course, adjust that level overall, the tone of it. And I like this down a bit further here. Blend in a bit of it, Pretty cool. We have a drive section, which is kind of like having a overdrive pedal. So drivers off, obviously it's not going to have any effect, but we have 3 different types: your fat, your tight, and your sharp. Then you can mix in overall gain, of course, the tone of that as well. Just set that up for whatever you want. Tight, got sharp. All right. Then you have amp voicings as well, 3 different types. So just set up what you want: gain, bass, mid, and high. All that stuff is pretty self-explanatory there. Same controls over here. More of a vintage sounding bass, of course, over here. Dial in some room. Sounds pretty cool. Of course, change your cab tone. Just depends on what you're recording, you know. All right, so there it is, folks. Voltage amps bass and voltage amps guitar. 5 different guitar amps and 2 different bass amps. So really all you need for your pop and rock and metal recording needs here in the Waves voltage amps, guitar, and bass plugins. Now you can get these included in the Waves subscription, but you don't have to go the subscription route. All right. So they brought back perpetual licenses. They brought back the sales. They brought back selling the individual plugins. Okay. So you can pick up Waves voltage amps for yourself, get it during the intro sale or get it when it's on sale. And, it's a pretty good deal for 5 different guitar amps. A wide range, a wide array of sounds are possible in these amps. Of course, I personally really like the aggro there. And of course, your 2 different bass amps as well. More vintage sounds, more modern sounds with your dark mass over there. Plenty of controls on your bass and of course your guitar to dial in just the sound that you want. All right, so that is Waves voltage amps. Head over there, check them out for yourself. Of course, I'll have links in the description below if you want to pick these up for yourself.